The early years of the National Socialist government in Germany demanded a highly complex and often contradictory foreign policy.
Absolutely. And that required a great deal of caution, didn't it, to avoid any kind of preventive action by the Versailles powers.
Who still had at that point overwhelming military superiority.
So this tactical duality piece on the surface, preparation beneath it, really defined Hitler's calculated gambles between 1934 and 1937.
And this strategy of caution and deception was tested almost immediately.
It was, with a major, premature, and ultimately failed operation concerning Austria in 1934,
The objective was the assassination of the Austrian Chancellor Engelbert Dollfuss.
planned by elements of the Austrian Nazi movement. And on July 25th of that year, the conspiracy was activated.
The details of the actual putsch are quite stark. They highlight the militant nature of the Austrian Nazi organization.
At noon, 154 members of the SS Standard 89 donned Austrian army uniforms.
And they stormed the federal chancellery in Vienna.
Chancellor Dollfuss was trying to flee, but he was intercepted.
And the official records confirm he was shot in the throat.
At extremely close range, about 2 feet away.
The planning, though it was flawed, showed a clear intent for a complete takeover.
Exactly. At the same time as the chancellery attack, other conspirators seized the Austrian radio station.
And what did they do?
They immediately broadcast a false announcement,
Claiming Dollfuss had resigned.
and that a pro-German figure, Anton Rintelen, was taking control. The goal was to present a swift fait accompli to everyone.
To legitimize the coup before any counter-reaction could even mobilize.
Mm-hmm.
And the Führer's immediate reaction to all this gives us a fascinating insight into his political psychology.
It really does. It demonstrates that balance between, calculated detachment and strategic ambition.
The news reached him while he was attending the annual Wagner Festival at Bayreuth.
He was listening to a performance of Das Rheingold.
Witnesses confirmed the internal excitement the news created.
Yes, Friedland Wagner, the composer's granddaughter, recounted how his adjutants Schaub and Bruckner were getting urgent updates.
Whispering the details to him.
And she said he was struggling to contain his elation, thinking the Anschluss, the union with Austria, might be happening right then.
But almost instantly, that excitement was channeled into a calculated performance.
Despite being scarcely able to conceal his delight, he meticulously ordered dinner as usual.
And then made a public statement that was purely strategic.
He said, "I must go across for an hour and show myself, or people will think I had something to do with this."
The critical facade. He had to project absolute ignorance of the plot.
To protect Germany from any international backlash.
Despite that public posture, history tells us that he was deeply involved in facilitating the preconditions for the putsch.
Of course. The goal of German-Austrian reunion was one of the fundamental tasks outlined in Mein Kampf.
Described as a mission to be furthered with every means our lives long.
And the support network for the Austrian Nazi Party had been systematically built up. He appointed a Reichstag deputy, Theodor Hapicht, to oversee the whole operation.
And that support wasn't just organizational, was it? It was amplified through propaganda and material aid.
Right. An exiled Austrian party leader, Alfred Frauenfeld, was set up in Munich,
Broadcasting nightly incitement directly to Vienna.
specifically encouraging these kinds of destabilizing actions. It was sustained, official German propaganda being weaponized against a sovereign state.
And crucially, the material support ensured the plot had a violent, concrete backing.
For months before July 1934, the Austrian Nazis were supplied with weapons and dynamite from German authorities,
Which they used in a sustained terror campaign targeting railways, power stations.
alongside the systematic murder of supporters of the Dollfuss regime.
I think the most overt indicator of premeditated German military involvement was the so-called Austrian Legion.
This was a contingent, several thousand strong, of exiled Austrian Nazis.
Camped just across the border in Bavaria.
Their function was unambiguous. They were prepared to cross over and occupy Austria the moment the putsch succeeded. It was an invasion force waiting for a pretext.
But the military gamble failed. The execution by the conspirators in Vienna was just too poor.
Dollfuss, though wounded around noon, didn't die until about 6 p.m.
And that 6-hour window allowed government forces, led by Dr. Kurt von Schuschnigg, to regain control.
The conspirators in the chancellery, seeing their position was hopeless, tried to negotiate safe passage to Germany.
Which the German minister in Vienna tried to facilitate.
A premature move. Schuschnigg's government refused to honor the agreement. The rebels were arrested.
And 13 were subsequently hanged.
Yeah.
It was profound diplomatic embarrassment for Hitler.
And the international reaction was instantaneous and decisive. It just confirmed Germany's isolation and weakness,
Only a month before, Hitler had met Mussolini in Venice.
and had promised him, almost as a personal assurance, to leave Austria alone.
Mussolini saw himself as the guardian of Austrian independence.
So he reacted fiercely. He immediately mobilized 4 divisions on the Brenner Pass, signaling hostile military action.
This rapid Italian move caused profound alarm in Berlin. It forced Hitler into a humiliating diplomatic reversal.
The German state machinery went into a frantic pivot to deny any responsibility.
The initial news story from the DMB, the official German news agency, which had celebrated the death,
Had to be withdrawn at midnight,
and a new version was substituted, expressing regret at the cruel murder.
claiming the whole thing was a purely internal Austrian matter.
This cleanup extended to personnel, too. Theodor Habeck was removed from his post and banished.
And the German minister in Vienna, who had tried to negotiate for the rebels, was recalled and dismissed for his complicity.
And to signal a complete retreat, Franz von Papen was dispatched to Vienna as the new ambassador.
A man who had just barely survived the night of the Long Knives Purge a month earlier.
His directive from Hitler was specifically to restore normal and friendly relations, a clear signal of capitulation to international pressure.
Papen later confirmed the depth of Hitler's alarm. His initial joyous excitement turned to genuine panic.
He reportedly shouted, "We are faced with a new Sarajevo."
He feared the assassination could trigger a European war, one that Germany was utterly unprepared to fight in 1934.
So this moment solidified a critical strategic lesson for him.
The Nazi putsch was premature. Germany was too isolated diplomatically, and more importantly, it lacked the military strength to back up such a venture.
It proved that the policy of deception had to be absolute.
And that the military buildup had to be accelerated and maintained in secret until Germany could physically enforce its ambitions.
And this diplomatic isolation wasn't just with Italy. The Soviet Union was also alarmed.
Yes, showing significant interest in what was known as an Eastern Locarno Agreement aimed at discouraging German expansion,
So by the autumn of 1934, the Soviets formally joined the League of Nations.
creating a potential anti-German alignment from west to east.
So facing this emerging united front, Hitler's strategy became fixed.
Preach peace publicly, continue the unflagging secret rearmament, and wait.
Wait for the opportunities that would inevitably arise to divide the great powers.
The commitment to the military buildup was immediate and, frankly, staggering. The army, the Wehrmacht, received orders to treble its numerical strength.
Jumping from the 100,000 limit imposed by Versailles up to 300,000 by October 1st, 1934.
And this required a massive clandestine intake of recruits and officers.
General Ludwig Beck, the chief of the General Staff, was already informed in April 1934, months before the Dollfuss crisis, that the plan was to openly repudiate Versailles.
With a decree of conscription slated for April 1st, 1935. So the secret expansion was just a foundation for a planned open breach.
And until then, an intensive culture of silence was maintained.
For instance, Joseph Goebbels was specifically admonished never to permit the term General Staff to appear in the press.
Because its very existence was forbidden by Versailles.
And to frustrate foreign intelligence, the official army rank list, which tracked officer growth, just ceased publication entirely after 1932.
The lengths they went to for secrecy demonstrate the high-stakes nature of the operation.
General Keitel, who chaired a key defense committee, issued a directive in May 1933 that became the governing principle.
What was that?
He instructed his aides, "Matters communicated orally cannot be proven, they can be denied." It systematically established plausible deniability.
So the paper trail was non-existent.
The naval branch, under Admiral Erich Raeder, pursued similar wide-scale violations.
The Versailles Treaty limited German warships to a maximum of 10,000 tons.
Yet in June 1934, Hitler gave explicit instructions to Raeder about 2 new battle cruisers under construction.
The instructions were precise and deceptive.
No mention must be made of a displacement of 26,000 tons, but only of improved 10,000-ton ships.
These were the ships that would eventually become the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau.
A staggering 16,000 tons above the legal limit. This was the clandestine construction of capital ships.
And the U-boat deception was arguably even more brazen.
Because submarine construction was explicitly forbidden.
So what was the solution?
They relied on preparations made years before. Frames and parts for a dozen submarines had been secretly constructed abroad. In Finland, Holland, Spain.
And these components were being stored in sections at Kiel, ready for rapid assembly.
By November 1934, Raeder was confident enough to request permission to assemble 6 of them,
Citing a critical situation in the first quarter of 1935.
which clearly indicates the military leadership knew of Hitler's planned open breach the following spring.
And funding this explosive buildup required equally creative and clandestine methods.
When Raeder noted the new shipbuilding program exceeded naval funds, Hitler offered a cynical solution.
He told Raeder to approach the German labor front.
He said, in case of need, he will get Dr. Ley to put 150 million from the labor front at the disposal of the Navy, as the money would still benefit the workers.
So the compulsory dues collected from millions of German workers were being diverted.
Directly to finance illegal naval rearmament, using the workers' own money to prepare for the war that would eventually consume them.
At the same time, Hermann Goering was rapidly establishing the Air Force, the Luftwaffe.
Under the camouflage of civil aviation and the German League for Air Sports.
Manufacturers were put to work designing dedicated warplanes, and pilot training began under the guise of flight schools and sporting clubs.
The entire military-industrial base was operating in the shadows, waiting for the signal to emerge.
And this preparation was built on foundations laid by German industry long before 1933.
We see this most clearly with the industrial powerhouses, Krupp and IG Farben.
Krupp, the premier gunmaker, had been forbidden from the arms business after the war.
Yet the company later boasted that the basic principles for tank design and the most important artillery pieces used between 1939 and 1941 were already fully completed and waiting by 1926 and 1933.
Which meant that once the funds were released in 1934, production could begin almost instantaneously.
IG Farben, the chemical giant, focused on strategic self-sufficiency,
addressing the key material vulnerabilities exposed during World War I, like the dependence on imported oil and rubber.
The Nazi government focused on strategic materials. The problem of synthesizing gasoline from coal had been solved in the mid-1920s, but it required massive investment.
And Hitler ordered production ramped up to 300,000 tons per year by 1937.
To ensure the Wehrmacht's fuel requirements would be invulnerable to a naval blockade. They also developed synthetic rubber, known as Buna,
eliminating another critical foreign dependency.
So by the end of 1934, the sheer scope of this mobilization meant concealment was reaching its limits.
Plans were approved for the total mobilization of roughly 240,000 industrial plants for war orders.
The entire rearmament effort had become so extensive that continued secrecy just wasn't feasible anymore.
And this impending inevitability led the Versailles powers, particularly Great Britain, to explore acknowledging the rearmament as a fait accompli.
Their diplomatic thinking was, well, maybe they could recognize German arms equality in exchange for Germany joining a general European settlement, including an Eastern Locarno Treaty,
which would have extended security guarantees to countries like Russia, Poland, and Czechoslovakia.
And the atmosphere for these proposals improved in early 1935.
Following a major domestic political victory for Hitler, on January 13th, the inhabitants of the Saar region voted overwhelmingly to return to the Reich.
Hitler used the resulting wave of national euphoria to publicly renounce any further territorial claims on France, seemingly abandoning claims to Alsace-Lorraine,
creating a brief but critical period of optimism in the West.
In this context, the joint Anglo-French proposals for an armed settlement were presented in February 1935.
But Hitler's reply on February 14th was deliberately evasive.
While he welcomed the potential for open rearmament, he flatly dodged commitment to an Eastern Locarno.
Because that would have tied his hands in the very area Eastern Europe where he intended to pursue Lebensraum.
Instead, he suggested bilateral discussions and extended a direct invitation to the British to visit Berlin.
A classic move to exploit divisions between Britain and France.
Sir John Simon, the British Foreign Secretary, agreed. A meeting was scheduled for March 6.
But Hitler immediately sought a pretext to accelerate his plans and act unilaterally.
The pretexts were quickly manufactured. On March 4th, the publication of a British white paper,
a sober, factual observation on Germany's accelerating rearmament,
was seized upon. The German Foreign Office feigned intense anger, and Hitler postponed the visit, citing a convenient cold.
But the decisive catalyst was a domestic French action.
The introduction of a bill extending French military service from 18 months to 2 years.
France was suffering from a critical shortage of young men, the so-called hollow years from the First World War.
But this necessary defensive move was spun by German propaganda as an act of aggressive expansion,
which provided Hitler the perfect political window. On March 10th, he sent up a crucial trial balloon.
Goering gave an interview officially announcing for the first time the existence of a military air force.
A clear unilateral abrogation of Versailles.
Hitler waited for the reaction. Protests from Paris and London were mild,
Critically, Sir John Simon confirmed that he still intended to proceed with his visit.
signaling that the Allies were unlikely to use force.
So the stage was set for what became known as the Saturday Surprise.
On Saturday, March 16, 1935, Hitler decreed a law establishing universal military service.
This was designed to create a massive peacetime army of 12 corps and 36 divisions.
Roughly 500,000 men. It was the complete and open repudiation of the military restrictions of Versailles.
And as he calculated, the Allied powers protested, but took no unified military action.
Britain immediately confirmed that Simon would proceed with his delayed visit, signaling they were willing to negotiate around this new reality.
The next day, Heroes Memorial Day was transformed into a national spectacle.
To mark the death of Versailles and the rebirth of the conscript army.
The ceremony at the State Opera House was a deliberate visual demonstration of national resurgence.
Witnesses described a sea of military uniforms, with a backdrop of an immense iron cross signifying restored national honor.
This crucial decision, however, was Hitler's alone.
It demonstrated his increasing confidence in overriding professional advice. General von Manstein later testified at Nuremberg that he first learned of the 36th Division figure over the radio.
The General Staff had actually preferred a more cautious buildup of 21 divisions.
They believed 36 was a stretch that could provoke the Allies unnecessarily.
The final figure was attributed entirely to a spontaneous decision of Hitler.
And the international reaction was characterized by ineffective, delayed gestures.
Britain, France, and Italy convened at Stresa, forming what was briefly called the Stresa Front.
Condemning Germany's action but failing to do anything about it.
The League of Nations also expressed displeasure and appointed a committee.
France, realizing Germany would never agree to an Eastern Locarno, hastily signed mutual assistance pacts with Russia and Czechoslovakia.
But despite the protests, Hitler knew he had successfully executed his first major unilateral gamble.
The challenge then became a diplomatic one: how to undermine the fragile united front of the Stresa powers.
Which led directly to his May 21st, 1935 peace speech, one of the most eloquent and misleading rhetorical performances of his career.
The goal was to split Britain from the continental powers by appearing maximally reasonable. He adopted a relaxed, tolerant, and highly conciliatory tone.
He rejected the very concept of war as senseless and useless.
Proclaiming that Germany had not the slightest thought of conquering other peoples.
And he shifted the focus from military conquest to internal strength, saying a nation could increase its population through a sound social policy.
Concluding that National Socialist Germany wanted peace because of its fundamental convictions.
This was all reinforced by 13 specific proposals for maintaining peace,
including unconditional respect for the non-military clauses of Versailles and upholding the Locarno Pact.
And he made specific pledges designed to ease concerns about Poland and Austria.
He pledged to adhere to the French frontiers and the non-aggression pact with Poland.
And regarding Austria, he said, Germany neither intends nor wishes to interfere in the internal affairs of Austria, to annex Austria, or to conclude an Anschluss.
Every one of those pledges would be violated within 4 years.
The disarmament offer was also expansive, designed to sound reasonable.
A willingness to agree to any limitation, abolishing the heaviest arms, especially suited for aggression, like heavy artillery and tanks.
But the pivotal moment of this speech was the direct bait aimed squarely at Great Britain.
Hitler offered to voluntarily limit the new German Navy to 35% of the British naval forces.
And he emphasized this ratio was final and abiding,
seemingly ending the threat of a costly Anglo-German naval arms race like the one that preceded 1914.
To make the offer irresistible, he included excessive flattery for the British Empire,
stating that Germany recognized the overpowering vital importance of a dominating protection for the British Empire on the sea.
An astute psychological calculation, appealing to Britain's historical sense of naval superiority.
And the reaction in Britain was overwhelmingly positive. The Times of London welcomed the speech, describing it as reasonable, straightforward, and comprehensive,
urging the government to take it as a sincere and well-considered utterance.
This eagerness to believe Hitler's promises provided the perfect opening.
The British government immediately accepted the bait, rushing into bilateral negotiations.
Joachim von Ribbentrop was invited to London. He informed the British the 35% offer was non-negotiable.
And without consulting their stress allies, France and Italy, Britain formally wiped out the naval restrictions of Versailles by signing the Anglo-German Naval Agreement.
The consequences were devastating for collective security. It wasn't a limitation, it was an encouragement endorsed by the paramount naval power.
By agreeing to the 35% ratio, London gave Hitler free rein to construct a navy as rapidly as possible.
Legitimizing the secret buildup that had already been ongoing.
It was a profound betrayal of France and Italy.
Britain refused to disclose the specifics to Paris. The terms authorized Germany to build 5 battleships, 21 cruisers, and 64 destroyers.
Even more alarmingly, the agreement authorized German submarine tonnage to be set at 45% of Britain's, with the possibility of reaching 100%.
Britain essentially granted Germany the power to rebuild its U-boat fleet, which would inflict disastrous losses on British shipping just 4 years later.
The immediate geopolitical chain reaction favored Hitler perfectly.
Mussolini observed the perfidy of Albion, Britain's cynical disregard for the treaty framework, and felt emboldened to flout the League Covenant himself.
On October 3, 1935, Italy invaded Abyssinia, or Ethiopia.
The League, led by Britain, voted for partial sanctions, but they were timidly enforced and failed to stop Mussolini.
Critically, these actions destroyed the Stresa Front and effectively drove fascist Italy directly into the orbit of Nazi Germany.
German officials immediately saw the strategic opportunity. A diary note from October 4th laid out the win-win scenario for Hitler.
Either Mussolini stumbles and is weakened in Europe, allowing Hitler to seize Austria.
Or he wins, defying France and Britain, and becomes ripe for an alliance with Hitler against the Western democracies. Either way, Hitler wins.
And with the international powers sufficiently distracted and divided, Hitler began preparations for his next great gamble.
The reoccupation of the demilitarized Rhineland.
The pretext was the Franco-Soviet Mutual Assistance Pact, which was ratified by the French Parliament in March 1936.
French officials had anticipated this. As early as November 1935, the French ambassador in Berlin warned Paris that Hitler intended to use the pact as an excuse.
To argue that it violated the spirit of the Locarno Pact, freeing Germany from its obligation to keep the zone demilitarized.
And the research confirms this was entirely premeditated. General von Blomberg had already issued the first directive for the reoccupation, codenamed Schulung, in May 1935.
19 days before Hitler gave his famous peace speech, promising to respect Locarno.
The secrecy protocols around Schulung were extreme. Blomberg wrote the initial order by hand.
The intention was to execute a surprise blow at lightning speed.
The action itself was on Saturday, March 7, 1936. The military force deployed was deliberately minimal.
Only 3 battalions crossed the Rhine bridges, totaling 1 division for the entire territory.
Its success depended entirely on Allied paralysis.
The diplomatic announcement immediately followed. Foreign Minister Neurath summoned the ambassadors, denouncing the Locarno Treaty,
And simultaneously handed them new proposals for a 25-year non-aggression pact.
As the French ambassador put it, Hitler struck his adversary in the face, and as he did so, declared, "I bring you proposals for peace."
2 hours later, Hitler stood before the Reichstag and announced that German soldiers were already marching.
It triggered a scene of mass hysteria. Deputies leaped to their feet, their faces contorted with fanaticism and delirium.
But despite the public bravado, the internal anxiety among the military leadership was profound.
Generals Blomberg, Jodl, and Beck were deeply convinced the French would counterattack.
Blomberg had issued strict orders for a hasty retreat back across the Rhine if they met any opposition.
Jodl later testified, "Considering the situation we were in, the French covering army could have blown us to pieces."
This highlights the critical distinction between Hitler's political risk calculation and his generals' military caution.
And the crucial element was a lack of Allied action. France was paralyzed.
The French government wanted to act, but General Gamelin, chief of the General Staff, advised that any offensive operation would require a general mobilization of the French army.
The government, politically divided and wary of the cost, hesitated.
They adopted a purely defensive posture rather than an offensive countermove. This fatal paralysis was Hitler's strategic salvation.
He later admitted that the 48 hours following the move were the most nerve-wracking of his entire life.
Conceding that a forced retreat would have spelled collapse and almost certainly the end of his regime.
But it was his unshakable obstinacy, as he later put it, that saved the operation when the High Command wavered.
The failure of Britain to honor its Locarno obligation proved equally critical.
When the French foreign minister flew to London to plead for military counteraction, his pleas were rejected.
The prevailing sentiment among the British elite was one of dismissal. Lord Lothian famously remarked, "The Germans, after all, are only going into their own back garden."
This was the last strategic chance for France and Britain to halt an aggressive, militarized Germany without facing a serious, prolonged conflict.
And their inaction confirmed to Hitler that his judgment, not his generals, was correct.
The success of the Rhineland coup had immense consequences. Domestically, it fortified his popularity. He claimed 98.8% approval in the subsequent referendum.
And it cemented his authority over his hesitant generals.
But more significantly, the occupation irrevocably changed Europe's strategic configuration.
By occupying and eventually fortifying the zone, Germany gained a crucial protective buffer.
And France's allies in the East, Russia, Poland, Czechoslovakia, suddenly realized that France could no longer provide effective assistance.
Once Germany constructed the impregnable West Wall, any French effort to aid an Eastern ally would require its army to smash through those fortifications.
And a France that lacked the nerve to repel 3 German battalions was certainly not going to bleed its young men to aid Prague or Warsaw.
This new strategic reality was explicitly stated by Foreign Minister Neurath to the American ambassador William Bullitt in May 1936.
Neurath said, Germany's policy was to do nothing active until the Rhineland had been digested, that is, fully fortified.
And he offered a chilling prediction.
As soon as our fortifications are constructed and the countries of Central Europe realize that France cannot enter German territory at will, all those countries will begin to feel very differently about their foreign policies, and a new constellation will develop.
And this prediction proved immediately accurate.
This new geopolitical constellation began forming immediately, starting with Austria.
Dr. Schuschnigg, who had protected Austrian independence, concluded that appeasement was his only remaining option.
This was driven by 2 factors: the loss of Mussolini as a protector and the terrifying realization that France could no longer intervene.
So he entered into negotiations with Franz von Papen, resulting in the Austro-German Agreement of July 1936.
In the public text, Germany reaffirmed Austria's sovereignty, while Austria pledged to act as a German state.
But the secret clauses were the undoing of Austria. Schuschnigg agreed to grant amnesty to Nazi political prisoners and to appoint representatives of the national opposition to political posts,
Installing a literal Trojan horse within the Austrian government, exemplified by the lawyer Arthur Seyss-Inquart.
Interestingly, Papen recalled that Hitler was initially furious, calling the published treaty a trap for himself.
Yet it was precisely the secret clauses that provided Hitler with the leverage to force the Anschluss 2 years later.
The next major opportunity arrived swiftly with the outbreak of the Spanish Civil War.
After Italy conquered Abyssinia, General Francisco Franco staged a military revolt on July 16th.
Hitler, once again at the Wagner Festival, received an urgent letter from Franco requesting assistance.
And he, Goering, and General von Blomberg made the decision that same evening to support the rebellion.
The decision was instantaneous because Hitler saw several clear strategic advantages.
German aid was technically decisive. It totaled $500 million spent on aircraft, tanks, technicians, and the notorious Condor Legion.
The unit that gained infamy for the obliteration of Guernica.
The Spanish Civil War served multiple strategic goals. It was a testing ground for the new Luftwaffe.
But more importantly, the research shows Hitler's primary goal was not just Franco's victory, but the prolongation of the conflict.
He believed continued fighting in Spain would tie up Britain, France, and Italy, keeping them focused on the Mediterranean and away from Central Europe.
He later stated that 100% victory for Franco was not desirable from the German point of view. Germany was more interested in a continuance of the war and in keeping up the tension in the Mediterranean.
This calculation was clearly understood. The German ambassador in Rome noted that the Spanish conflict was preventing Italy from being drawn back into the Western powers net.
The tensions would drive Rome to confront the Western powers shoulder to shoulder with Germany.
This convergence led to the formal establishment of the Rome-Berlin axis.
Mussolini's foreign minister, Count Ciano, visited Berlin in October 1936. Hitler, immensely confident, declared Mussolini the leading statesman in the world.
And it was during this meeting that Hitler provided a concrete, aggressive timeline,
He stated confidently, "In 3 years, Germany will be ready."
which placed his expected date for major military confrontation squarely in the fall of 1939.
A secret protocol was signed, outlining a common foreign policy. A few days later, Mussolini publicly referred to the agreement as an axis.
And with Italy secured, Hitler expanded the alliance structure eastward to contain the Soviet Union.
On November 25, 1936, Germany signed the Anti-Comintern Pact with Japan.
Publicly, it was presented as a defense of civilization against communism.
But the treaty also contained a secret protocol explicitly directed against the Soviet Union.
It stipulated that if the Soviet Union attacked either signatory, they would immediately consult on measures to safeguard their common interests.
It was a military diplomatic framework intended to bind Japan into supporting Germany in a future conflict with Russia.
So by January 30th, 1937, Hitler had an astonishing 4-year record to review.
He had abolished unemployment, created an industrial boom, built a powerful military, broken the fetters of Versailles, occupied the Rhineland, and secured key allies.
This vigorous, martial new Germany stood in stark contrast to the Western democracies.
Whose succession of failures and vacillations only increased Hitler's contempt for their stumbling political leaders.
Their policies of non-intervention and diplomatic engagement reinforced his conviction that they were too timid to fight.
And while he believed he could achieve his goals without a major war, the inner circle of the regime was under no such illusion.
Hermann Göring, in charge of the 4-year plan to prepare the economy for war, delivered a secret speech to industrialists in December 1936.
And he laid bare the true objective. Warning. No limit on rearmament can be visualized. We live in a time when the final battle is in sight. We are already on the threshold of mobilization, and we are already at war. All that is lacking is the actual shooting.
This confidential warning signaled that Hitler's era of calculated gambles was drawing to a close, transitioning rapidly into the phase of inevitable pre-planned conflict.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed learning something new. That's all for now, but in case you didn't notice, there are a lot more episodes on this subject available right now. If you're enjoying these historical podcasts, please like and subscribe and share with other history buffs.